Hi, I'm Angela Wolf, fashion designer and online instructor. Remember the 80s when all the running suits came out, except most of them were polyester, maybe a little velour? I know I had one, but I didn't wear it very often. Nowadays, athletic wear is a staple in everybody's wardrobe. They have great designs, but there's one really fun feature. Let's stick my little thumb in here. See this? They're attached to many of the garments. For this, it's attached to the outside. This jacket right here is one I wear all the time, and this is actually attached to the inside hem. Just think of it as attached texting gloves. They're there for warmth a little bit. They help to hold your sleeve down. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to make these, and you can add them to anything. So I'm wearing a fleece that I always wear for fishing. I like to have a little bit longer sleeves, but still there's sometimes in the mornings or in the afternoons where it gets a little chilly. So these are perfect. Now, this is not the color I would use, but see what happens? Then you have this to keep your hands warm. At the same time, they're wide enough that if I had taken the jacket off, I could slide this inside and not have to worry about it. So they're really functional and they're useful. So here are two different sizes. You can make whatever size you need, and I'm going to show you how to make a pattern. And here's one that's even a little bit longer. So if your jacket, you cut your jacket a little bit too short, or you bought a jacket, it can be longer. You have all the options. So let's look at some fabric. Here's just a lightweight knit. This is very similar to this fabric right here. High stretch, very light. This is a great one. Here's a black Ponte knit. This one's okay, but it doesn't stretch as much. In order to find a good fabric, stretch it and make sure it goes back into shape. Otherwise, every time you put it on, it'll just keep stretching out. So this would not be my first pick, but it would work. This one's a great one. This is a ribbed fabric. Look at that. Goes right back into shape. So you could squeeze it onto your hand and it would wrap around your hand nicely and it keeps its shape. And this is just another polyester knit. This one actually has some good stretch to it as well, but only one way. So just play around a little bit. This blue fabric wouldn't be my first pick, but I thought you could see it better. This is just a cotton knit. It's fine. It's very similar to this one here, except this one is ribbed. So this eventually, though, could stretch out of shape. And if I wore this all day, by the end of the day, this part could be pretty big. And then when you wash it, it will go back into shape. So let's look at the pattern. This is the cuff you're going to make. I've written on here the fold. How do you decide how wide to make it? Well, usually when I make texting gloves, I'll measure around the base of my hand and around the top of my hand. But in this case, we're attaching it to the jacket or to whatever you're wearing. So I need to measure across the bottom of my pattern. And this needs to match here. That's how wide this is going to be. Now, if you choose to make this narrower towards your hand, you can. So then it would be wider up here and get tighter around your hand. Or in my case, I tried it on and this was just perfect. So if you wanted it more narrow, you would just start from here and angle in just a little bit. Okay? So here's my pattern. And what I've done also is I've created a line. Here's my fold, which means that both sides are exactly the same. And here you can see I have 1 inch and I have a little marking. 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches, you have to picture, here's the 1 inch, here's the 1.5 where your thumb comes through. If you want a wider one, go to 2 inches. And then here I have 1 3/4 or longer in this case. So you have to picture this one's really long. And it's actually the same thing on the other side, which if I folded that over, would be down here. So hopefully you can kind of relate how this pattern is. So an easy way to mark your fabric, here is just a piece I have. And I'm just going to take this and just use your scissors. Now you can use whatever seam allowance you want. I usually use either 1/4 of an inch or 1/2 of an inch, depending on the fabric. But I'm going to make these extreme cuts so you can see what I'm doing. Here's the 1 inch notch. I'm just snipping right into the seam allowance. Not past where my seam is going to go, but try to go however deep your seam is going to be. So I'm snipping these just under 1/2 of an inch. Well, actually it looks closer to 1/2 of an inch, but there's a reason for this. I folded the fabric so everything is going to be even when I sew this together. But now that I have these snips here, just like this, I won't need pins or anything to sew this together. So I'm going to fold over the fabric with right sides together, and we're going to go to the sewing machine, but before we go, I want to show you. I'm going to stitch from here to here, back stitch. You have to back stitch or it'll rip out. Start again from here. This is 1 inch below the fold, and stitch all the way to the other notch. Again, back stitching on both sides, and then one more from here up. And we're going to leave our thumb holes open. And when we're finished, I'm going to fold this over, and you'll see, I'll do it slowly at the machine. We'll be stitching these by machine instead of doing them by hand. Okay, so let's go to the machine. I'm just going to pick a straight stitch, just a basic straight stitch, 2.5 or 3.0 length. Again, I'm going to use a contrasting thread so you can see what I'm doing. One tip about sewing with knits. If you noticed, I had started stitching in just a little bit, because if you start right at the end, that knit can embed in that hole in your needle plate, and then you'll be digging this whole thing out. So just start a little bit ahead and back stitch and then go. Okay, I've stitched to there, and now I'm going to leave this part empty. That's for one of my thumbs. Back stitch. These are so simple to make. I've actually started attaching them to quite a few of the t-shirts that I wear in the morning. I'm not a runner, but I do like to be outside. Okay, so here we have our notches. Now this is the part you have to follow. I'm going to turn this right side out. Now, if you want, you can press this open. I'm just going to finger press it open for now. So I'm finger pressing this open, and we're going to flip the cuff so it's right side out. Just like this. I'm lining up this seam. Just finger press your seam open, just like this. And kind of maneuver it around so you can figure out how it's going to fit. Looks pretty good. Okay, so these are the two things we're going to finish now. Now, it takes a couple times to get this right, so just follow. I'll try to go really slow. I'm holding my hand at the fold, and all I want to do is to get inside here and sew this side. You can't sew both, so I'm just going to sew that side. So I'm going to flip inside here. Pushing the other seam out of the way. See that? So here's the fold. There's my notch. Fold this out of the way. Okay, you're only sewing one side. I'm trying to do the one side slow for you so you can see what's going on. All I'm going to do is stitch from here to here, lining up my previous seam lines. Let's go back to your machine. And just stitch a little bit, back stitch. And this seam is just a little bit inside. See this previous seam and that previous seam? It's just a little bit inside. You could line it up perfectly, but I'm doing it just a little bit on the inside, and I'll show you why. Okay, so that side is finished. Now let's go to the other side. Again, this is my fold. Get the other seam, the other side out of the way, so you're only working on one side of your fabric. And again, I'm going to stitch. Here's my fold, here's my notches matching up. And again, I can see I need to stitch from here to here. All right. So here I have completely enclosed this for my thumb. You could do it by hand too, but wasn't that pretty fast? It only takes a couple tries. Now, on a couple of the jackets, I noticed there's a nice top stitching around here, very similar to maybe a buttonhole. So you can just grab a straight stitch. I actually have a stitch on here that allows my machine to go different directions. So all I'm going to do is start right in the center, and I'm going to stitch to the right, because it's a very small place to get into. And now I'm going to stitch forward. All I'm doing is securing the seam allowance inside of this. All right, see if I can flatten this out so you can watch. Again, it's going to the left. I'm gonna lift up my presser foot. You can see it's a very tiny area to get into, so if you don't want to top stitch your thumb hole, it's okay. And now I'm gonna go backwards. Okay, I'm gonna stop it because I can't quite get it flat for you to watch, and I'm gonna make a mess of this. But you get the idea. I'm gonna go all the way around here and then back, okay? And if you don't have that feature, then just stitch around it, and if you don't, then don't worry about it. But let's attach it to the sleeve now. So what I'm gonna do, both sides of these are right sides. So all you're gonna do, now this is important, you have your sleeve. This is my under sleeve. You're not going to attach it with this matched up to your under seam because your thumb is not in the middle of your hand. So move this over a little bit, and you can see I have about maybe 2 inches different there. I always just try it on while I'm measuring, just to make sure I have it right. So here I'm doing right sides to right sides, and we have a 2 inches from that center seam on your sleeve. And then I'm just gonna stitch around, go back to a straight stitch. Actually, my cuff is too small to fit on that. Sometimes machines have this thing that come off. It makes it really easy to go around the cuff. Oops. Put my presser foot down. And again, just with a straight stitch, if you're using a really tight shirt, like say a t-shirt that has a lot of stretch, you're gonna wanna use the serger, or you're gonna wanna use a zigzag stitch, a very small zigzag stitch. A longer length, 4.0, and the width being like a 0.5, just barely a zigzag. Why on earth would you wanna do that? Well, because if this was a real tight t-shirt, you're going to have to fit it around your hand. And if you're only using a straight stitch, you're gonna rip out the stitches. So I'm gonna go just a little bit further here. I'm not gonna finish it all the way around, but I wanna show you what we have. So you would have stitched this around. I would serge this, like I mentioned, or use a little bit of a zigzag stitch. And this would just tuck right up into the hem. This is a really good color combination, isn't it? We got a little red, green, and blue going on. So my thumb fits here. You can see the center of my seam. That's correct. This is correct for my thumb. It looks great. And then all I would do then is just hem the shirt or the jacket just like I would in the first place. So have fun with this. You're gonna look stylish even when you're working out.